Okay, good afternoon. Now we have another author, and his name is Justin. Justin Pogue
Yes.
is pronounced right?
Yes, it's pronounced Pogue.
Okay. And I met you at Network After Work,
Yes, the speed networking
speed
event.
networking,
Yeah.
and it was at a good venue. It was like, what was it called?
It-
Suite something?
yeah, it was similar to
Co-working
similar
space.
co-working space, yeah.
Yeah. So it was good for me to go because I got one guest, one sale, and many other connections.
Yeah.
So it's a good to go.
Yeah, it's an excellent opportunity. I actually made a sale that day too.
You did?
Yeah.
Oh my
Yeah.
God, it was great. So for me, um, when I go to regular networking, it doesn't work as good. I mean,
Mhm.
because you meet someone for 2 minutes and then you never. With this one, it's 15 minutes at the table. That's a long time to
Yeah.
connect.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
and you get to do your elevator pitch once for 3 or 4 different people
at the same
at
time.
the same time.
So that's a very clever way to maximize. I mean, your message and your
Yes.
time. So anyway, your book is called Rental Secrets, um, and I guess because you are in real estate.
Yeah, so my background is actually in residential property management,
I
and I've been
see.
doing that since 2003.
Wow.
And over the course of those years, I've dealt with thousands of people looking for their next rental home.
Yeah.
And kind of walking through that process, I learned about the value that renters really have to landlords,
Hmm.
and but I was finding that people really weren't using that value to negotiate with their landlords when they're looking for properties.
Okay. So that's 15 years.
Yeah.
When you say 2003, that's
Yeah.
15 years.
Yes.
And you were like a rental manager.
Yes.
And you heard all kinds of stories, right?
Oh, absolutely. There's all kinds of really great stories about people looking for apartments, renting apartments, when they've moved out of apartments. There's stories on every stage of the game.
So you
Yeah.
compiled it in the book. I
Yeah.
mean, the solutions.
Yeah. So the book really focuses on strategies that people can use to reduce their rent or get better value for what they're paying.
Oh, to reduce the rent.
Right. And the book is really focused on market strategy. So we're not talking about affordable housing programs or Section 8 programs or,
No.
how to live in less than ideal housing. It's not about any of that. It's about the market power that renters have
Yeah.
to negotiate with landlords to reduce their rent. And the premise is that landlords have problems. If you can help solve the landlord's problems, they will pay you in the form of reduced rent.
Wow.
Yeah. Just like when you go to a restaurant, you're hungry, they solve your problem, you pay them.
Mm-hmm.
Landlords work the same way.
Wow. So how do you find out what's your landlord problem?
So, landlords have the problems that landlords have are the same problems that landlords have everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the issues that landlords have is when they're renting an apartment, they're renting you space.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they're selling space, but they're also selling time. That space is available for a certain period of time.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that they're interested in is the continuity of their cash flows, keeping someone living in that apartment for years or as long as possible, as opposed to switching residents every year.
Oh, I
Okay,
see.
because there's a cost to them to do that.
To look for another tenant.
Right. So there's marketing costs, there's lost rent, depending on how long it takes them to fill that apartment again. There's costs in terms of cleaning the apartment, making repairs. There's a lot of things that are tied up into that.
So they
That-
want you to stay longer?
yeah, they would prefer that you stay longer.
Oh, okay. But unless they need it, right?
Right.
So, so why is the popularity of Airbnb going so strong? Because people want short term.
So it's a Airbnb is a different market. So these are people that are coming to visit a particular city, whether it's for business purposes or pleasure purposes. They're coming for a short term anyway.
Oh, okay.
So the market that the Airbnb is competing with is more of the hotel market.
Okay.
But in terms of landlords who own property who are renting them to residents,
Mm-hmm.
their preference is for those residents to stay as long as possible.
But why more and more people are using Airbnb because to fill their apartment because they get paid
You
more.
can get paid more because it's a short. If somebody's visiting, like when you look at a hotel, for instance,
Yeah.
the nightly rate at a hotel
Yeah.
is going to be 3 or 4 times that typically of the
Than
nightly
the long.
rate for a long-term apartment that someone might rent.
Okay. So there is some landlord that are
Mm-hmm.
actually interested in short term.
Mm-hmm. Yes, there are. There
Okay.
are.
So but you focus mostly on long term on this book.
Right. Right.
Okay. So I go see you. You are the landlord,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm a renter,
Mm-hmm.
and I would like to negotiate a lower rent. What do you suggest I do?
Okay. So the first step is understanding the the competition that the landlord is facing. Okay. So you'll see a lot of even the really large apartment complexes. They'll have their signs out. They'll have somebody standing on the street corner waving a sign. Now leasing. Come rent here, and many times they'll have some type of offer or incentive. A certain number of weeks free, or reduced deposit or whatever to attract attention. That's because they are in competition with other properties in that area to get quality residents, to get people with the income and so forth that can actually qualify. Now, when you apply, there's also another group of apartment buildings that they're competing with
Yeah.
that the landlords typically aren't thinking about. So, let's say you have a job, and let's say you're talking to a landlord that's 30 minutes west of your job. Okay, where the apartment is 30 minutes west. Okay, that landlord, they're thinking about all the communities that are within a mile or two of their location.
Okay.
What they're not thinking about are the communities that are also 30 minutes east of your job. For you, it's the same 30 minutes commute in the morning.
Right.
For them, they're not looking at it because they're not in their neighborhood.
Okay.
So other neighborhoods might be competitive from your standpoint. So bringing that information to that landlord, letting them know, these are who your competitors are. This is what I can get at this location. And your price is a little bit higher. I like your community, but if you could bring your price a little more in line with who your competitors are, that would make me more likely to rent your apartment as
So
opposed
you
to
tell
choosing
him
someone
that?
else. Absolutely.
Oh,
Absolutely.
you tell him, listen, I found something in Oakland that's $500 less. Would you negotiate with me and let me stay in San Francisco?
Yeah. I mean, they are competing against any community that you as a
Next
renter
door.
would choose.
Oh,
Yes.
okay.
That's who their competition is. But they don't have time to go through and research which communities all of their prospective residents might be looking at.
Okay.
They're far too busy to do that. But if you're actually bringing that information to them, that information is really useful
Yes.
from the standpoint of their business and them moving forward.
Okay. But in San Francisco in general,
Mm-hmm.
we all know, without being owners of
Mm-hmm.
real estate, that if we go to the suburbs like Burlingame, it's going to be cheaper than if we stay in San Francisco.
Right. So you're making
Assumption that we know.
well, but it's one thing to say, yeah, it'll be cheaper. It's
Yeah.
something else to say, this community is offering me this type of apartment at this price. And
Okay.
yes, I have to do a little trade off for commute and so forth, but these are this is the actual research and information. It's verifiable. I've talked to these people. This is where the competition is.
Okay.
As opposed to just saying, I know it's going to be cheaper in the suburbs. You can actually put some numbers around that, so you can talk intelligently with your landlord.
So even though he knows, you remind him.
Right, he knows it'll be cheaper, but how much cheaper? What are the trade-offs that you're looking at?
Okay. So
Okay?
you remind
So you can
him.
be specific.
Listen, I found another apartment complex with much lower rent. Would you be? Would I'll be saving maybe time to stay in San Francisco?
Right. Right. So now they're not necessarily going to reduce the rent to the same as the other community in the suburbs,
Okay.
but they may come down some. And if they come down $50, $100, $150, that's money that will be, and that's a monthly rate that they're changing. So that $50 a month becomes $600 over the course of that lease.
But this what strategy you're exposing here, I mean, presenting here, is only for owners who have the authority to fluctuate. But for apartment complex, it's fixed.
It's a very
There is no
That's a
negotiation.
very good. That's a very good point. And when people bring up that point, typically what I'll tell them is that if you're talking to the actual property owner,
Yeah.
you are talking to someone who can negotiate.
Right.
If you're talking to a leasing
Corporation.
agent,
Yeah.
they don't have the power to negotiate, but
Exactly.
they work for people who do.
Okay.
The regional their property manager or their regional manager, those are the
Could.
people who
Could.
have those are the people who have the ability to negotiate. And if you present your case
Yeah.
in a way that that leasing associate could take to that regional manager, then they can have that discussion. Because the important thing for the regional manager is we keep the building occupied. If people are not living in the building, what are we here for? We're not doing anybody any good. So the importance of
Is to fill up all the space.
keep those spaces filled. Um, and another strategy that I talk to people about is when you're looking at a particular apartment community, go and ask what apartment has been vacant for the longest period of time.
Oh yeah, facing
Right.
another wall.
Whatever that situation may be.
Yeah.
Now, as the leasing associate, when you ask that question, you just became my hero.
Oh.
Because I have probably been trying to lease that apartment for 3 or 4 weeks, and every week there's a leasing meeting, and we're talking about what apartments are available, what's coming up, what hasn't leased, and after week 3, we're all really tired about talking about the same apartment. So if you are looking for that apartment that's vacant, and you then rent that apartment, and I can walk into the leasing meeting in week 4 and say, yes, I got apartment number 55 rented,
Yeah.
then that is a kind of a little badge of honor that I can wear because I solved that problem.
Okay.
And you, as the renter who is looking for that vacant apartment,
Also solved your problem.
yes, also got your problem solved.
Okay. But the leasing agent will make less commission if he is willing to talk to your discount with the regional.
Anything beats zero. I mean, yeah, though they may make less commission renting the apartment for less money,
Yeah.
but if it doesn't rent, they get zero, and
Okay.
until it rents, there's no commission to be gotten.
So it's better to get some commission.
Yes, and it's better to keep the flow of incoming residents moving
In.
and moving in as best as they can, because that's where the value of the building comes from.
I think you must have faced this situation in 2001 when there was a crash where everybody, I mean, no, it's not 2001 because you weren't there yet, but there were 2008 where people couldn't afford the rents anymore because so many layoffs. Then there was a lot of empty spots, right? They had to reduce the rates.
Yes. I mean, and that's where, and having the knowing how to speak the language of knowing how landlords are thinking, and really knowing how to speak their language, you can take advantage of situations like that sooner, where you're not waiting for them to reduce the rents. You're really coming to them and saying, look, I see what's going on in the marketplace. I see how, a lot of people are losing their jobs. This whole situation is changing. People are leaving. So you can even kind of prompt that conversation sooner.
You're going to tell them it's going to be even more and more vacancies, and if you reduce my rent, I'll stay.
Right. And there's another component to this as well, is if you're living in an apartment already and you're looking, and every year they'll send you a renewal notice, and that renewal notice may say
usually have an increase.
Right, and usually has an increase of let's say $200 to $300, for the next year or what have you.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't really think about what the landlord will be dealing with if you chose to move out.
Oh.
So if you choose to move out, let's say the rent's $4,000 a month, just to make it easy.
Okay.
So if you choose to move out, it's going to take them at least a week to bring in their vendors to fix, repair, clean, all of that stuff to get it ready for the next person. Now, assuming that they have somebody lined up to move in after that week, they lose $1,000. But typically, that's not what's going on, because they may have a waiting list, but if that waiting list is anywhere near 30 days old, it's already stale. Those people have moved on.
Right.
So you've lost $1,000 in rent that first week, if that takes 2-3 weeks for that next person not only to sign a lease, but to actually
Moving.
pack up their stuff from the previous apartment, get their friends to help them move, rent the truck, kind of
You're
actually
losing
move
actually
in.
a whole month.
Yeah, you're losing a whole month, which means you've lost $4,000 in an attempt to get an extra $100, $150, $200 a month.
Right.
And it takes you a year or more to earn that lost revenue back.
Yeah.
So
Do they calculate these things?
yeah, I mean, this is actually when they look at their profit and loss statement for the year, like all of these factors come into play.
Okay.
So if there's a way that I can negotiate some rent increase and not have to pay $4,000 plus the cleaning and the maintenance and all of that, then there's some negotiation that can take place there, because I really don't want to have to pay that. If you choose to move out, I would rather you stay.
Mm-hmm.
And that is part of the logic that landlords are going through.
Okay. So if they are sole owner and also the agent, they will negotiate. But if they are multiple layers of decision makers,
they'll have to kick that upstairs.
Okay.
Yeah, they'll have to kick that upstairs to their manager or their regional manager, and those discussions will take place at that level.
Okay. But some leasing agents won't let you talk to the.
No, you can't talk to them directly.
No.
That's why it's important to be able to speak the language of that landlords use, so that they can take that and then go make the case for you, where they can say, I have an opportunity to keep this resident. This is what they'd like to do. Okay. And they would present that on your behalf, and then they'll come back with an answer for you.
Okay. And there are other strategies in the book?
Yes.
Give me one more.
Another strategy in the book, then this one's really interesting. So in the state of California, any apartment building that is 16 units or more is required to have an on-site employee. Okay. Now, landlords, especially small landlords, they're not going to be the on-site employee. They're living wherever they're living. But it creates an opportunity for someone else
to manage
to help. You're taking over management of that smaller community. You're helping the landlord satisfy the legal requirement, and quite frankly, it can be really useful to have somebody on site to let vendors in and to show apartments from time to time and that kind of thing. And in exchange, that person receives either greatly reduced rent, or in some cases even free rent for their services. There. Yes. So it can be a really interesting strategy where you do that part-time, you're able to get free rent, and then you're also working your day job or whatever other income source that you have. Now, it's not necessarily a strategy that everyone can use, but it is a really interesting and powerful strategy, and it has a lot of benefits. In addition to the free rent, you're also part of your job is to show apartments. So you're meeting people, you're networking with people as they come in and look for apartments. And then if you couple that with having a roommate or living with a spouse or a partner, then it just becomes even that much more powerful.
Okay. So how do people find out who has 16 units? It's hard.
Well, the size of a particular building is pretty much public record. That's available from the county. I mean, you can get that pretty easily, and you probably find it even online. But if
it's a requirement, they already have hired somebody, more or less.
Possibly. I mean, you do have people in transition. So property management.
Come and go too.
Exactly. Property management is an industry where there's a lot of turnover. Okay. And having those, and it's a matter of there's some research involved in having those conversations with either individual owners or property management companies about what their needs are. But a really good place to look for those is, for example, Craigslist.
Okay.
There are people who place ads for that type of person when they need it on Craigslist.
Oh, they need a manager on site.
Yeah, and the value of that is the other states may have similar laws or rules as well. Um, so it's not just a strategy that applies here in California. Its usefulness would be across the board.
In your career of 15 years, did you pretty much stay with the same apartment complex?
No. So my background, I managed real estate that my family owned.
Oh,
And
that's
then I
different than
also,
being an employee.
yeah, but I've also been an employee too.
Okay.
So I worked for a company in the Bay Area. I was managing 200 plus apartments spread between Mountain View, Campbell, and Santa Clara. Um, so I've been very much exposed to the housing crisis and situation in the Bay Area, and the cost of housing, and working with people who are trying to rent and who are trying to deal with that situation. Um,
So basically, you have experienced both sides,
hmm
being the owner
hmm
kind of thing, part
Yes.
of the family, and also working for someone.
Yes.
And now you're self-employed.
Now I am self-employed, and after I finished working for the property management company, I kind of took inventory of my career, and I wanted to take my experience and help more people with the background that I had attained. And someone made a suggestion that I might want to write a book. Well, when I go into Barnes and Noble, I go to the real estate section, what I see in the bookstore I see real estate books for owners, investors,
Hmm.
managers. I
How
didn't
to
see,
become rich,
yeah, I didn't really see any books for
helping the other
residents.
guys.
Right. And it's really unfortunate because landlords and owners need residents.
Right,
They're two sides of the same coin.
right.
Um, and having residents that are feeling more empowered and more informed
Hmm.
reduces the level of frustration. And how that frustration has come out is, for example, I'm sure a lot of your viewers will remember Proposition 10 that was
Hmm.
on the ballot in 2018.
Hmm.
Um, that's really just a manifestation of the frustration and desperation in the housing market that a lot of people are feeling, because they feel like they don't have any power. They can't influence what's going on around them. Things are just happening to them.
Hmm.
Um, and part of the reason why I think my book is so valuable is because it really lays out specific, actionable ways
Yeah.
that people can take some of that power back. Now, I'm not saying that all of these strategies work in every situation, but to know that you have some strategies that you can use to take action to better your situation. Because while there may be governmental solutions that come down the road, it may take 2, 5, 10 years to implement those. I need a roof today. I need to figure out how to better my situation today.
Right.
And that's what my book kind of addresses.
Okay, great. Yeah, like you said, all the books I see on real estate on Amazon are become a millionaire by flipping house
Uh
or
huh.
doing that. Isn't there a danger of creating more homelessness into buying and selling real estate, because each time you buy, then you increase the rents and evict everybody, or something like around that line, unless the people can afford the rent increase,
Mm-hmm.
because the next buyer wants to increase rents, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So typically, what and as a property investor, I've done this too, where you I'm typically looking for the worst house in the best neighborhood.
Okay.
And then what I'm adding to that property is I'll come in and I'll repair the property. I'll add washer and dryer. I'll fix it up and raise it to a livable standard,
And then
um,
rent it.
and then rent it. That's how I've been investing in real estate. I would go in and then fix it up and then rent it
Okay,
to
that's a
people.
different story. You
Um,
fix it up.
right, right. So we're talking about creating something livable
Over,
out of
over,
something
over.
that wasn't
Yeah,
in
something
many
of
cases.
value.
Right, right. Now, taking a property and flipping it, what a lot of people are looking at is it takes a certain amount of money to create a livable property, just basic livable
Mm-hmm.
property.
Mm-hmm.
If I add 15% to that cost,
Mm-hmm.
I can add fixtures and finishes, and then I can call it a luxury property
Oh,
and rent it for
for
more.
more.
And that's what a lot of developers have been doing. Um,
But the
but it's
people left
really,
behind are those losing.
yeah, it's really starting to affect the other people in that community who
Who were
can't
there,
necessarily afford that.
and they get an eviction notice.
Yeah, yeah. And what's starting to happen now is corporations are really starting to think about residential housing as part of their corporate strategy.
Okay.
So what's been in the news recently is Amazon doing their second headquarters, for instance.
Okay.
And
Then they need to create housing
right,
around that.
the Bay Area was not where
Oh,
they were, but did not make that final list. And the
okay.
reasons are cost of housing and traffic.
It's huge. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So companies are starting to really look at residential housing as part of their strategy. They're looking at how can we, if we're going to create these jobs,
Yeah.
let's create some type of
Housing
housing
around it.
solution nearby or with it, whether we do it ourselves or we do it in concert with developers, so that we're decreasing the impact on the community that's actually already there.
Right.
Um,
Right. So if Amazon wants to bring 20,000 people
mhm,
to, let's say, New York City,
mhm.
they have to create housing around the headquarters.
Yeah, you'd be looking for opportunities to create housing around for, and it's not just the 20,000 people that you're hiring.
Mm-hmm.
The average household size is 2.3, 2.5, around somewhere around 3 people.
Mm-hmm.
So it's those 20,000 times 3, because
Mm-hmm.
those people probably have spouses or significant others, and they may have a child or two.
Mm-hmm.
So you're looking at creating housing for not 20,000 but 60,000.
Oh, that too. That
Right.
too. I didn't think about that.
Yeah.
There's always somebody else with the
Yeah.
person.
Yeah, depending on the average household size,
So you have to plan on it before you actually build that headquarters.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
So that's to avoid people commuting too long or.
right. Because if you look at some of the companies in the Bay Area,
Yeah.
in some cases they've ended up becoming transportation companies because they have buses running all over the Bay Area to pick up their employees and bring them to
Downtown.
to their headquarters. And they really didn't start out with the intention of being a busing company, but that's what has happened over time.
Like, so they all have their own transportation.
Yeah, yeah. And another example of that is one of the corporate headquarters here. They actually have valets. When you pull up your car to park,
Oh,
they basically valet your car. So you just pull up to the valet, they take your keys, and they go park your car.
like Google,
yeah.
at the one market.
Yeah. Otherwise, it would take you an
Forever
hour.
to just get to work.
Right.
There's no parking.
Right, but it gets worse than that, because once you find parking and then you get into your office, the next hour you're going to spend talking about how it took you an hour to find parking instead of actually starting work.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
That's true. So yeah, I've seen that around one market street. People actually they don't have time to park, so they give it to someone
Yeah.
to do that for
Yeah.
them,
Yeah.
and they create jobs actually.
Yeah, but part of the danger is that as the cost of housing continues to increase,
Yeah.
those people who do those support jobs, the people who are working in these corporate cafeterias, the people who are valet parking these cars, are not going to be able to afford to live here and work here. And that's already manifested itself on a lot of different levels. I've actually met employees of some of the local tech companies who are choosing to move out of the area and go get a completely different job because the standard of living they have here is much lower, even with the higher salary, than they would have if they were working in another city for someone else. And they're actually choosing to make those changes. So one of the target markets for my book is HR departments of corporations that are dealing with employee attrition issues and housing issues.
Okay.
Just pass this information along to your employees, and actually do live presentations based on this book as well.
Okay.
And give them some solutions to start addressing some of that. So leaving the area isn't the
Only
first
solution.
isn't the only solution.
Okay.
Exactly.
Could be maybe working on reducing your rent.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I read somewhere that some people in San Francisco pay as much as 80% of their salary just for housing.
Yeah.
It's too much.
Yeah, it is too much, and it starts to undermine everything else that they need to be doing in terms of eating quality food, in terms of saving money should
They cannot.
the car break down, or it's just the normal things that happen in life.
Yeah.
That they're not able to
cannot
weather
do.
because we're paying 80% of our cost of housing.
Yeah. In Seattle, it was 25% for housing because there's a lot of housing.
Mm-hmm.
There's
Yeah.
people can find housing a dime a
Yeah.
dozen. Here it's the opposite. To find housing is like good
Yeah.
luck kind of thing.
Yeah.
You know.
But a lot of this, and some of this really boils down to having a relationship with your landlord and your property management company.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you're living in your apartment, you're paying your rent on time, you're not disturbing the other neighbors, you're making the community a good place to live. I, as the landlord, want to keep you there.
Oh, okay.
Because if you move out, in addition to all the costs that we've already talked about, I'm now rolling the dice on letting someone else move in.
That's as good as you.
Exactly. And I don't know if they will be or not.
Oh, okay.
Um,
But when the decision is at the corporate level,
mm-hmm.
it becomes more complicated.
Yes.
Because there's so many, the investors are involved. They are far away.
Mm-hmm.
It's just about investing, and maximizing profits. And they don't look that much at the renter.
Right. But maximizing profit is not only about charging the most money. Because earlier on in the conversation, we talked about they're selling
Cost.
space and they're selling time.
Okay.
Okay.
The cost of transferring.
Right, and the cost of transferring, the cost of vacancy, and those kinds of things.
Okay.
So there's a balance between the continuity of the cash flow and how much you charge.
Oh, okay.
The more you charge, the more difficult it will be to replace those residents when they move out.
Mm-hmm.
And the more you lose in that transition in terms of lost rent and that kind of thing.
It's also the law of supply and demand.
Mm-hmm.
The rents go up in San Francisco because there is demand. And because there's only 3% unemployment, so there are people employed who are willing to pay.
Yes.
But that leaves a portion of the population out in the cold.
Mm-hmm.
And they are out in the cold.
Yeah.
They're actually homeless.
So there are a number of strategies that people have come up with to kind of address that. You have a lot of people who are living in roommate situations where you have,
you have
4 or 5 people to
pay the rent.
Right. And even in those situations, those people as a group they're renting the apartment, so they do have the levers of negotiation that I'm talking about in this book. Right. It doesn't have to be one individual renting an apartment or one family that's renting an apartment in order for these strategies to be of benefit.
All right. So even as a group, they can use the strategy.
Yes.
Okay. So it looks like you present different strategy from different situation and for different types of renters.
Yeah.
Like could be roommates. They go together and they find a solution.
Yeah. I mean, in the roommate situation, I'd recommend you choose a spokesperson from the group. Right.
Oh, okay.
And then that person would go and present
the
case to the property manager that you're working with.
All right.
And when you're talking about that conversation, the relationship is really important and really key. Mm-hmm. Because you're asking me to do something a little bit out of the norm and my boss about this arrangement. If you're not cleaning up after your pet on the community grounds, if you're not paying your rent on time, if you're making noise and disturbing the community, I'm not going to go do that for you.
Oh, okay.
But if we have a positive relationship and you've been a good tenant, exactly, and you've been a good resident in my community, then I'll go and have that conversation
with the upper management.
Yeah.
Okay. So anyway, to go back to your book, it's called Rental Secrets. So basically, a way to reduce your rent
Yes.
and a way to negotiate if possible.
Yeah. Yeah. By understanding what the landlord's problems are, if you can help solve those problems, they will compensate you in the form of lower rent.
All right, sounds good. Sounds good to me. I should have read this 30 years ago because I've been a renter all my life.
Uh-huh.
So the reason I'm a renter is because I don't like to stay forever in the same place.
Mm-hmm.
And each time I thought about buying, I say, oh my God, what if I get tired of that place?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want that. I want the freedom to move.
Yeah.
So that's another topic. But renting is also very convenient, give you more freedom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
So, but this address renters,
Yes.
which is good. Should you buy this before you rent or after when you've been somewhere a while?
I would buy this either or.
Either or.
It's
Okay.
important. You're renting a property, so you've entered into an arrangement with a landlord.
Yeah.
It would be really nice to know how they're thinking, what the kinds of things that go through their mind, the issues that they're facing. That way you're prepared to have that initial rental conversation, or you're prepared to have that lease renewal conversation.
Cool.
But definitely read this before you start signing documents.
Okay, sounds good. Sounds good. So thank you so much for being here. So this was Justin Pogue, who you are a San Francisco resident, I assume.
I'm actually in San Jose.
Oh, he's in San Jose.
Yeah.
But this applies to San Francisco.
Yes, it does.
Do you know if San Jose has the same problems as San Francisco?
Landlords everywhere have similar problems.
Okay.
They're not all exactly the same, but they are similar.
And rents in San Jose are high too.
Yes, they are.
So thank you so much for taking the time to present your book. Thank you.
You're very welcome.